Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel, it's Shania. So today I decided to do an April TBR. Now normally I don't actually do TBRs on my channel just because I can never stick to them, ever. I cannot stick to a TBR, but I'm optimistic this month for two reasons. Because one, I just feel like I need a little bit of structure because last month I was literally all over the place. And then secondly, most importantly, I am co-hosting a BTS inspired readathon this month along with my co-host, Brooke Clark, and we came up with 20 different reading challenges or prompts for books that we want to read in the month of April. Now, I'm being a little bit optimistic here because I'm going to try and pair a book to each of the 20 prompts, but there's going to be a couple that I probably won't fit and I'm just going to use one book for multiple prompts. So I guess we'll see if doing a TBR is actually going to help me or not. And with that, let's just jump into the video now and get started on what books I will be reading in the month of April. Alright, so for the very first book that I plan on reading this month and for the very first reading challenge, we have the prompt of reading a book with multiple point of views. So for this one, I decided to read A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmerer. So if you guys saw my March wrap-up video, I talked about how I read the first book in this series, which was A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I would have thought. And I mentioned that I might not continue on with the series, but you guys said that the second one, A Heart So Fierce and Broken, is so much better than the first one, so I decided to give it a shot. And since it fit really well with this prompt of reading multiple point of views, since it has multiple point of views, I thought it was gonna be really fitting and I would give it a go. If you guys didn't read A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I would first start off with that one because the events that take place in that one, of course, are going to be spoiled in the second one. So in that book, we have a Beauty and the Beast retelling where we have our main character Harper, who lives in DC, and she ends up getting kidnapped and brought over to the Feyland, and she meets Prince Ren, who is cursed to be a beast at the end of each season. And of course, to break this curse, we have to have a girl that falls in love with him. So enter Harper. So in that book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, the whole central focus of the book is Harper and Prince Ren's relationship. And then in this book, we have a different focus. We are focused on one character that is very closely tied in the first book to Prince Ren and Harper's relationship, and then another person that we have not been introduced to yet. So I'm not exactly thrilled that we have different characters in this one. However, I am excited to see whether or not this book is actually better than the first one and how it pans out overall. Alright, so for this next book, we have the reading prompt of reading a book by more than one author, and for this one, I've been wanting to get to this one for like ever, and now I have the perfect reason to do so. But that book is Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. So I have had this book for like the last, I don't know, years. I've been wanting to read this since I was probably like 16 or 17. It's been forever and it's been sitting on my shelf ever since then, and I just haven't picked it up yet. And this is actually the only John Green book that I've never read. So I'm excited to get to this one and finally read everything by John Green. So this one is obviously by more than one author. We have John and David Levithan, and this book deals with what it sounds like. We have two teens who end up meeting one night in Chicago, and they both have the same name, Will Grayson, and they end up having a relationship. I don't know what type, like I think a friend relationship, but I'm really excited to get to this one, and like I said, it's been on my reading TBR forever, so can't wait to get to this one, and it fits that prompt perfectly. Alright, so the next reading prompt is reading a book that went through a cover change, and for this one I decided to read Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I have yet to read the Lunar Chronicles, and this series did just go through a cover change, but right now I just have the original covers. And let me tell you, this one is something that I have been recommended so much on my channel ever since I started BookTube. Everybody's been saying you have to read the Lunar Chronicles. It's like a cult classic at this point on BookTube, and I definitely need to. I have the entire series and just have yet to get to it. So in particular, this book deals with our main character who's 16 years old, and her name is Cinder, and she is actually a cyborg. So the entire series is a fairy tale retelling. So this one in particular is a Cinderella retelling. So we have Cinder, of course, and then she has a stepmom who I believe she doesn't like, very much like Cinderella, and she ends up meeting Prince Kai, who I have heard so much about. All I hear is about Cinder and Kai and how they have like the best relationship. So I'm excited to read that. I hope that the romance is very, very good. I'm very optimistic about that. And I just can't wait to get to this one. This is going to be a book out of all of these that's probably going to be highest on this TBR. Just because I've been recommended this so much and I just want to see if I become a big fan of the Lunar Chronicles as well. So moving on, the next reading prompt that we have for this BTS inspired readathon is read a book that is underhyped. So for this one, I honestly have never heard anybody on BookTube or social media ever talk about this book because this is actually a book that I found just randomly, so I wouldn't be surprised if nobody's really read it before. But that book is A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Bernard. So when I bought this one, I was at Barnes & Noble with my best friend, and we were just perusing the young adult romance section, and she pulled out this one. It was just kind of looking at it, and then she found out that one of the main characters in the book is called Reese, and it's spelled the same way as Reese from the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I was very excited because of that. So I totally just bought it because the guy in the book was called Reese. I was obsessed. So I bought this and I never actually read it, and I just felt like I didn't have time for it. There were other books that were on my list that had more importance than this one. So now that I have this prompt of reading an underhyped book, I have more reason to actually bump this up on my TBR and read it. And it actually sounds so adorable, you guys. This book has a girl named Steffi who is mute by choice. She just doesn't like to talk very much. She's very shy and she has a lot of anxiety. And one day a new student comes to the school and his name is Reese, and he is deaf. And since Steffi has a little bit of knowledge in sign language, she gets paired with Reese to show him around the school and get him acclimated to it. Since Steffi is mute and Reese is deaf, they end up forming their own way of communicating with one another, and a romance blooms between them. And I just think that this is going to be a really adorable book to show how being able to talk with one another or having any sort of language barriers doesn't mean that you can't form a bond with someone. So I'm very excited with this one. I think that it's going to be great, and I hope that from it I can maybe hype this one up if it's as good as I hope it's going to be. Alright, so for the next reading prompt and the next book that I'm going to be reading in April, we have the prompt of reading a backlist title. So when it comes to backlist, what I'm considering a backlist title is going to be anything that didn't come out in the year 2020. So the book that I chose for this one was The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I talked about this book a little bit in my book haul video that I did not so long ago. We have our main character Alex, whose sister does get murdered, but it's by somebody else, and that killer ends up going free. And from that experience, Alex gets very upset and she acts out very violently. But she doesn't get punished for those violent acts, and she continues on with her life even though she has a very dark side to her. Eventually, we're introduced to two other characters, Jack and PK, who are very entranced with Alex. They become friends with her and they really like her, and one night she ends up, Alex, showing her dark side to them, her very violent side, and from there we just continue on with the book. I don't really know what happens after that, but I first learned about this book from Kate's book date, and she said that this is one of her all-time favorite books, so I was intrigued from it and I picked it up. So I'm excited to see if when I read it, if I have the same thoughts as she has and that I love it, or if I don't like it. So I just can't wait for this one, and that is what we chose for our backlist title. The next book that I have on my TBR is The 10th Girl by Sarah Faring. This is for the prompt of reading a thriller or taboo book, and I chose a thriller book. So this is a book that I picked up last year and I have yet to read, even though I've said that I was going to read it like several times, but I haven't read it yet. What's really interesting about this book, and the reason why I want to read it now, is because last month I read The Headmaster by Tiffany Reyes, and that book almost sounds the exact same about this one. So this is about an isolated school in South America, and our main character is a teacher. She ends up getting a teaching job at this school, and it's an all-girls school in the middle of nowhere. And we have some really interesting things going on. We have a man that is threatening our main character, and we also have these others, which I believe are ghosts. So there's a family curse that's happening in this school as well. And why it reminded me of The Headmaster was because that book dealt with an isolated school in the middle of nowhere, but it was an all-boys school instead of an all-girls school. And our main character in that one also got a teaching job there, and there were these mysterious things going on where she thought she saw a ghost. So it's like almost the same thing, but I think that this one's probably going to be a lot more interesting because the Headmaster was predominantly just about romance, and this one I think is going to be more focused on the thrilling and mysterious elements that are in play within this book. So, very excited to read this one, and I think it fits the prompt of reading a thriller very, very well. Okay, so the next book that I plan on reading in the month of April is going to knock out 2 different prompts. So the first prompt it's going to hit is the prompt of reading a book with a bird on the cover. And then the other prompt is reading a book that is your most anticipated release. So the book that I plan on reading is Imagine Me by Tahereh Mafi, and this book is the 6th and final book in the Shatter Me series. The only thing that worries me about Imagine Me is I'm just really nervous about the ending. I hope I like it because I really liked the ending of Ignite Me, and at that time I thought that Ignite Me was the ending, which it technically was. So I'm kind of getting like a deja vu now where I'm nervous about the ending of this one because I didn't really like the 4th and 5th books that she released. So I just hope that it's really good. I've heard really great things. People have said it's a 5-star read and they've been crying their eyes out. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And I'm so nervous about this book, you guys. I just think it's gonna be really sad to see the series end and to no longer have any more Juliet or Warner. But I hope I don't hate it, because sometimes I hate endings so much. Like, you guys, I didn't like Queen of Nothing, so unpopular opinion right there. Alright, so moving on, the next reading prompt that I am planning on pairing a book with is reading a banned book. And for this one, I decided to choose Slaughterhouse-five by Kurt Vonnegut. I was really excited about doing this particular prompt because I had said at the beginning of the year that I had a goal of reading about 5 classics within this year. I wanted to incorporate more classics in my reading, and this is definitely a classic. Kurt Vonnegut is a very well-known author, and I think that this one, I mean, I'm not entirely sure on what happens in this book, but I believe that this is a slight autobiography. I think that Kurt Vonnegut relied very heavily on his own experiences to write this book, and I believe, not sure entirely, but I believe that it is about all the bombings and everything that takes place during World War II and his kind of experience with that, as well as living through a different character. So I'm not sure exactly plot-wise what happens in this, but I'm very excited to read this. I want to dive into more Kurt Vonnegut, and this is definitely a banned book. And what's interesting about this one actually is that this book was originally banned in Georgia, but it was also banned in, well, not necessarily banned, but it was burned, like copies of this book were burned in North Dakota. So I think that's interesting because me living in South Dakota and not being from North Dakota, sometimes we have a little bit of a rivalry happening with that state, and since they burned it, I just want to see if they had a good reason to burn it or not. I don't think you have any good reason to burn a book, but I just want to see if it really should be banned at all, and if their reasoning for having a banned book in Georgia or wherever, if it fits with this book. So this is the book that I'm choosing for a banned book. Okay, so the next reading prompt is to read a book that won't take up much of your time, aka a short book. And so for this one, I decided that I wanted to either do a poetry book or do a graphic novel, and since I don't read as many graphic novels as I would like, as I mentioned in my unpopular opinions video, I want to incorporate more graphic novels in my reading. So I decided to read Saga Volume 1 for this prompt, and this one, I have been told quite a bit, is a really good graphic novel series, and it's very interesting. I think it's very out there. I like flipped through the illustrations one day and it was like super weird. Like, we have a different type of species where, you know, it's like in outer space or like sci-fi type of graphic novel. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but it's got some weird creatures in there. That's basically it. And I think that this is going to be a really different, unique type of book for me. So I cannot wait to get to this one, and hopefully I enjoy it enough to continue on and read the other volumes as well. So we are going to try out Saga Volume 1 for this reading prompt. Alright, so for the next book that I'm going to be reading, I have the prompt of reading a very hyped book. And for this one, I decided to go with a very, very hyped book. And that is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. If you guys watched any booktube videos in 2019, you guys probably saw this one at some point because everybody was talking about this last year. Like, it was so hyped and everybody was either loving it or they were hating it. So I'm excited to see what I think of it myself. This book already sounds very interesting because it deals with the character Elizabeth, who has grown up around magical elements and sorcerers her whole life. She has lived in a library filled with books that are very magical, like what you would think of with Harry Potter and the Forbidden Library, those type of books, or if you read Crescent City recently, that type of book. But in this one, we have the most dangerous book that ends up getting released from the library, and our character Elizabeth gets accused of a crime and is torn from her family and taken to the capital to face punishment for such crime. And she ends up getting paired with Nathaniel, who is her sworn enemy. He is a very dangerous man, and it sounds like to me right there like we got an enemies to lovers trope, and you guys know I love that. So I'm very excited about this one just to see if I think it deserves the hype that it got or not. That's what I decided to choose for the hyped book, and if you guys have read this, if you love it or hate it, I'd be really interested to know what your thoughts are down below. Alright, so the next book that I have in my TBR is for the reading prompt of reading a book that you previously DNF'd. So for this one, I decided to go with King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This book I did not intentionally DNF, however, when I was reading it, I think I just picked it up at the wrong time. I had just come off finishing Crooked Kingdom from the Six of Crows duology, and I was an emotional wreck after that one, and I jumped right away into this one, and that was just a mistake because I was not emotionally prepared yet to dive into this one, and the events that happen do tie in with the Six of Crows duology and the Shadow and Bone trilogy. So I just wasn't prepared mentally to go into this one. But I feel like now, since it's a year later, I have had enough time to recover since Crooked Kingdom, and I feel like I need to pick this one up. So we're gonna give this one a second chance and see if I really do enjoy this one or not. Alright, so staying on the Leigh Bardugo train, the next book that I have for the reading prompt of reading a book with a number or numbers in the title, we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So if you guys have been following my channel for a while, then you guys have probably seen me mention this book a time or two. I have been wanting to read this book ever since it came out in November. I've talked about it so much on my channel, and I just have yet to read it for some reason. So if you guys haven't heard of this book yet, this is Leigh Bardugo's first adult thriller novel. It deals with a girl who is involved in a murder, and she's the sole survivor. She ends up getting a full ride to Yale, and when she arrives at Yale, she finds out that there is a secret society, actually more than one secret society at Yale, and she ends up joining one of them, which I believe is called Ninth House, or some sort of society, 8th house, 9th house, whatever one she joins. But she joins one, and there are, I think, ghosts involved in this, a lot of mysterious things. So this is the book that I'm going to try and read this month. Okay, so the next reading prompt is kind of a fun one, but I'm going to say that this book that I'm going to be choosing for this prompt is going to be the lowest on my TBR. Like, if I don't get to this, I won't be too upset because this book is a childhood favorite, and that is the prompt, is to read a childhood favorite. So what I chose was Maybird and the Ever After by Jodi Lynn Anderson. Yes. So this was one of my favorite series ever. I believe it is a trilogy, and I loved it as a kid. I thought it was so good, and it dealt with our character Maybird, who just is kind of an outcast at her school. She doesn't like her school because people make fun of her, so she always goes to the woods because that is where she feels safe. And she has her sidekick, Somber Kitty, who is ugly as crap. Can you even see him? He's ugly. But she one day falls in the lake, and when she gets out of the lake, she is in a whole different universe or dimension or world. Like, wherever she is, she's in a different place. And in this place, it is very different. A lot of the elements are super weird, and the people that live here are super odd. So that is the book that we're choosing for this prompt, and we'll just see if we get to it or not this month. Okay, so the next reading prompt is to read a book with a bromance in it, and this one, I didn't know what I was going to choose, but I decided that I would double up on a book and have one book for this prompt as well as another one, and that is going to be A Heart So Fierce and Broken. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a one that I wanted to get to at some point, and since this one does have a bromance in it, I'm going to choose this one for that prompt as well. So that's what we're choosing, and I'm not going to go into any other description because I think it speaks for itself that there is a character in this book and another one named Prince Ren that have a really great friendship. So there it is. Okay, so for the next reading prompt, we have read a sci-fi book, and for this one, this is where I am very optimistic. Do I think I'm going to get to this book? No. But am I going to try anyways? Yeah, we're going to really try, and we'll see about this one. But that book that I chose for a sci-fi book was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This one deals with our character Spencer, who has grown up with her father being a pilot, and he ends up dying, I think. But she has always had a dream to fly into space and become a pilot herself. So I think that is her journey throughout this, is becoming a pilot and looking to the stars. I'm gonna try for this one, and we will just see at the end of the month if we read it or not. All right, moving on to yet another book in my TBR. We have a book that's gonna accomplish 2 of the reading prompts that I have in my BTS Readathon, and those prompts are 1, read a book by a favorite author, and 2, read a 5-star prediction. So for these 2 prompts, I decided to choose The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I absolutely love Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I love Daisy Jones and the Six. It is my all-time favorite standalone book ever. And so I'm really excited to read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo because everybody loves that book too, and some people love it more than Daisy Jones and the Six. So I'm really inspired to see if I love it more than that, and if it takes over the spot of my all-time favorite standalone. Okay, so I have 2 more books for you guys. This TBR list is just so long and ridiculous, but the next prompt that I have is read a 2020 release. So the book I'm going to be reading for this prompt is going to be The Anti-Virginity Pact by Kate Wismer. So that's Kate, as in Kate's Book Date, a very popular booktuber on here. It's so exciting that she has a book coming out. It's huge, and congratulations to her on that. So her book is going to be coming out on June 16th, but I have an art copy of it, so I'll be reading it this month and seeing what my thoughts are for it. But this book is about a preacher's daughter named Meyer who signs a pact to lose her virginity. She is also an atheist, which makes the story really interesting, but this pact that she signs to lose her virginity gets tossed around school, and she ends up getting slut-shamed very heavily, and the school just ends up judging her quite a bit. But she ends up meeting this guy who knows nothing about the pact, and she and him have a really great connection, a really great relationship started. And of course, the pact has to come and ruin that, and they have complications with that. And then she also faces complications with her family since her dad is a priest and she is an atheist and also trying to lose her virginity. It just causes a lot of problems for her, and I'm just really excited to see how this book is. I'm going to be looking at it not so much as a book by a booktuber. I'm going to be reading it like any other book because I want to give it my honest opinion. So very excited to read this one, and it absolutely fits the prompt of it being a 2020 release. Okay, so for the very last reading prompt and the very last book on my TBR, we have the prompt of reading a book that's out of your comfort zone. So I decided for this one that I was going to choose a mystery/thriller book because even though I do like to read thrillers, I don't read them as often as I would like. And my comfort zone 100% is romance, like young adult, new adult, romance. That's where I read all the time. So the book that I feel is out of my comfort zone is The Whisper Man by Alex North. It's the last one on my TBR, but I could bump it up higher. We'll just have to see how the month of April goes and if I'm feeling it or not. All right, so those are all the books that I plan on reading in the month of April. It was a long ass list, but I am optimistic, like I said, and if I really read as hard as I possibly can and enjoy it while I'm reading it, then I think I can maybe read quite a few of these. Especially now that I have online classes, I have a little bit more free time, and I think I could probably accomplish this because back in January I read 16 books, and that was like with me going to class every day. So I think we can do it if I just sit down and actually read instead of playing like Animal Crossing or watching Netflix instead. If there are any books in this list that you guys have read and loved and you think I should bump it up even higher on my list of reading in April, please let me know down below because I just need some motivation, like I said. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. I would love it if you join the family. And always, if you liked this video, please hit that like button and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!